Today, a fascinating discussion with the CEO of UK-based Voquent, one of the major voiceover service providers globally, about their recent stand against AI. It's an especially strong stand in the context of the ones that the other providers have taken in recent months. And we talked to Miles Chicoine today about that stance. Miles has got some amazing insights, some really interesting insights about AI and how it's affecting both the voiceover industry and the world at large. This is our chat with Voquent CEO Miles Chicoine. Miles, first of all, thanks for taking the time to join us all the way from Glasgow, Scotland today.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to be here.
You and Voquent have taken a firm stance against AI voice cloning, and I want to get to that. But first, I want to ask you, back in 2020 rather, you said that what many expert voice actors don't realize is that AI voices are currently generating an insatiable appetite for real human voices. In 2023, AI's evolved quite a bit since then. Do you still think that's true?
Yeah, yeah. No, I do think it's true. I think that right now the appetite for human voiceover is as great as it's ever been. I think the market for human voiceover is still expanding. I think that's part of why Voquent as a company is expanding, but I think it's also why we still see more inquiries and more requirements for human voiceover than ever before. But I know that that's not maybe exactly what everybody is experiencing. If they're a voice actor, they might not be seeing that same thing. They might find that work is drying up, or they're going through a more difficult slump. I know a lot of very, very experienced and professional voice actors right now who are saying that it's the quietest downturn in work that they've ever been through as of late. And I think there's other factors at play. I think it would be giving AI far too much credit to suggest that that's the reason why there's a downturn. I think there's actually much bigger things going on in the economy right now. We've obviously had the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine. We've had inflation increasing at exponential levels, and then obviously interest rates being pushed up. And I think that what we're seeing in the economy and the struggles, the fear of a looming recession, what we're seeing in the television economy, certainly in the United Kingdom, it's very obvious that a lot of the television production companies have burned all their budgets for what they thought was a kind of a COVID era or a sort of post-pandemic era type of sort of production schedule. And then suddenly they're finding that there's a lot of media production agencies, a lot of freelancers, not just people who work in performing, but in all sides of the cast and crew who are desperate for work right now. So there is a downturn, I think, in the industry that is visible, in the States, it's visible in the UK, it's visible around the world. We've been lucky in that we're kind of we're not experiencing that downturn, I guess. But I think that there's definitely an issue right now with the voiceover economy, and part of that is to do with the media, and some of that is to do with, or shall I say, the lack of work. But I think that AI has got a part to play in that. But the question maybe is better: is AI causing a downturn, or is it taking work that was never going to get sold in the first place? And I think that that's where you can make a case for AI still playing I need to be careful of my words here. Sort of having if you could call it a positive influence, that is the positive influence. There's people who are now purchasing voiceover, even if it is through an AI, who would never have been able to afford any kind of voiceover. And just the very existence of that has been the basis for a lot of projects that we're getting, where people are saying, we did this with an AI voice, the audience hated it. We'd like to get it done with a human recording. So to me, those are good examples of where the market is expanding because of AI. But there's an offset to that, which is, there's a sour point. And I think the sour points are where the real problems are. And certainly dragging down the rates is, it starts there instantly. If people think they can get a voiceover done with an AI that sounds pretty good for a couple of dollars, or they can spend $300, or go to Fiverr and spend $50, or go on to or talk to an agency and spend $1,000 or $2,000. Um, all of these are big numbers in comparison to a couple of dollars for an AI voice, and so it's not really an even playing field when you find yourself as a voice actor competing with pretty good sounding AI voices for kind of maybe corporate explainer or training videos, or sort of bread and butter jobs that maybe aren't promotional, but the narration, it kind of just about works. And I think that that's particularly difficult for new voice actors who are getting into the game. They don't have the skills professionally to be able to compete with these AIs. Um, these AIs are tremendous compared to somebody who's just starting out, and that definitely creates a problem in terms of market value and the perception of what a voiceover should cost to today's modern customer.
As the CEO of Voquent, I'm wondering where you sit. Is the primary threat of AI, is it that economic pressure? Is it the commoditization of voiceover? Or is it something larger?
Yeah, so there's really three areas that I think AI represents, a threat. Uh, I'd say that the first point is where it comes to remuneration and compensation. If this isn't just voice actors, I mean, this is really any artist, someone who's they could be a writer, they could be a painter, they could be a singer, they could be an actor, they could be a voice actor. Any art right now is at threat in terms of remuneration, because if your work is being reproduced by generative AI, without and particularly without your permission, but let's put that aside, the permission side, just for a moment, we'll come back to it. If you're not getting remunerated for that, or if the perception is that the remuneration should be much smaller because it's already so widely abundant and available, that definitely represents an erosion of rates. And there's already been an erosion of rates problem for a long time, particularly in the voiceover industry, but across all the arts, where people are finding, they're struggling to produce beautiful creative works and getting fair value for that. And that's not something that's easy to regulate, because when somebody starts out, somebody says, okay, I'm going to be a painter. Maybe they're not a very good painter and they want to sell paintings. Is their paintings worth, thousands? Is their master worth thousands, or the copies that they got printed worth thousands? Maybe not. Maybe they're just not worth that much at all. But you have to build up a name for yourself and get yourself there, and get yourself to that position where you've kind of marketed yourself. You know how it is. And eventually you establish that benchmark that says, I know what I'm worth. I know what my worth is. And therefore I have a line that I'm willing to draw in terms of what I charge and what I expect to get paid, no matter who's paying me, or whatever it is. This is what I have to get paid. But obviously, when you're trying to draw that line and you're competing against a couple of dollars, it means that you're having to sell the difference a lot harder. And that's frustrating if the clients are sitting there saying, and we get clients who say that ourselves, why should I work with one of your voice actors when I can get this done for a couple of dollars? And when it's weird when you get asked that question, you go, is this person really a customer, or is this someone who's just going to waste everybody's time? Because to me, the obvious difference is visible within a couple of seconds. That's and I think people sometimes try to use it to beat us up and try to get us to lower our prices. Oh, you know what? If you were just a little bit cheaper, but you're going to force me to go the AI route. And we do hear that a lot. But I don't think it really. I mean, we're a pretty well placed professional team. We know how to basically. We know what our value is. We know what the value of our voice actors is, and so we don't sit here in a position and go, oh, well, in that case, since you're only going to pay a couple of dollars, I guess we'll go ahead and just knock a bunch off the price, and ask the voice actors to knock a bunch off their prices, and we'll just find a way to give this away, because you could obviously get this really great quality thing for a couple of dollars. But I think that it can be difficult if somebody has not been in the industry very long and they start to feel that pressure, and they start to think, okay, I do need to lower my rates. I do need to charge myself at maybe $20 instead of 100, and they're just starting out, or $200 is what they would have charged, and now they're thinking, yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll do it for you for 90 or whatever. Whatever the kind of logic that goes through their head. for someone who's new in the industry, this is definitely going to affect them. They're thinking, how do I sell against AI? And they're not prepared. They don't know how to sell against AI. So inevitably, it's going to push the rates down. And the rates were already low before AI came into the scene and made everything much cheaper. The rates were already a problem. Rates were a problem before we even started Voquent. I could see that when we came into the industry. I thought, like, wow, okay, there's a real issue around rates and what people are getting paid. There's an oversubscription of people who want to be voice actors, and there's not enough work to go around, and this is creating a real problem. And that's going to continue to exist. But I think that exists even more as a problem because of AI. It's basically making that problem more visible than ever, and it's dragging the overall rates down.
So, very recently, you in a blog post and therefore Voquent have, I don't want to say taken a new hard stance, but you've certainly solidified and clarified your stance, specifically around AI voice cloning. What precipitated that, Miles, and why now?
Okay, I think the thing is, when we a year ago, we had already recognized that there was a lot of voice actors. We speak to voice actors every day. I would imagine that we would have conversations. What somebody in our production team, or our talent management team, or our engineering team will probably speak to anywhere between 50 to 100 voice actors a day. Conversations with voice actors on the phone will take place. And I think that when you've got as many different conversations like that, you end up starting to realize what matters to people. People talk about their fears and anxieties and their concerns in the industry, and people have been afraid of AI for quite a long time. And some of those scenarios that they're afraid of are a little bit far fetched. AI is going to take over the world, and it's going to become the next Cyberdyne, and it's going to be like Terminator and what have you. And maybe that's not far fetched. Maybe that's what's going to happen, and we don't even realize it's coming. But if I'm dead honest, I feel that some of those scenarios are a little bit far fetched, but the fear has been very real. The fear has been very present and very real for a lot of people, and we've noticed that fear getting stronger and stronger for some years now. And so we would do a lot to try to reassure them and say, hey, look, we're in this game too. We're right here with you. And we wouldn't be growing if there wasn't an appetite for human voices. And therefore, you should be confident that there's going to be an appetite for your voice as well. The work's not going to dry up. Just keep marketing yourself, keep doing all the things you do. And you can still be successful. Don't think you're going to be out of a job because of AI tomorrow. I think, though, that some of the narrative is starting to change around that. But we've seen it going on for years. And so what we did a year ago is we thought, well, what we're going to do is we're going to just add into our terms a clause that makes it clear to people that if they upload their audio to us, we are not using that audio to build AI. Now, a year and a half ago, it seemed almost kind of pointless to do that, because um, to train an AI model a year and a half ago usually took quite a lot of work. You generally looking about 30 to 50,000 words. Yes, there was closely guarded secrets in development at Meta and Microsoft and what have you, where they had the technology that looked like it could be better than that. Um, in practical terms, I would say that it would have taken quite an investment of time and energy intently to build an AI clone out of someone's voice. And so at the time, I really wanted us to add that into our terms, really to offer some peace of mind to the people, not who are interested in reading our terms, but just so that we could point to our terms so that they would understand that we have absolute clarity on what our position is and what we're agreeing to and what they're agreeing to. And they don't need to worry that we, as a company that does take our technology seriously, and we obviously, our whole search engine is obviously something that's quite technically advanced. We don't want people to think that we're also technically advanced and secretly doing something that they didn't agree to, which is around the permission and consent aspect. Nobody's giving us their consent when they upload their audio to our site to build an AI out of that. And we wanted to be explicit that we're definitely not doing that. So if they think that might be happening, we're giving them the assurance that it definitely isn't, and we're ready to commit to that. So we put that into our terms a year ago, and we didn't want to make a lot of noise about it, because we thought that what it was do is draw the attention to the sort of fear and anxiety that we felt wasn't really necessarily, a good thing for everybody to be panicking about AI. But I think earlier this year, when it became clear, I'm not gonna name names, but we probably all know who I'm talking about.
Pretty good
Someone's,
idea, yeah.
a platform decides that it's a great thing actually to get on board with AI. In fact, a couple of platforms seem to think it was a really good idea to get on board with AI and get in bed with it and turn it into like a wonderful opportunity. And obviously, it becomes more obscure how this is all going to work. And and it's at that point that we felt pretty strongly about pointing back to our terms and saying, this was back in April, we just said, hey guys, we're here, our terms make it quite clear, and I have done over a year now, that we don't use voices for this, and other people shouldn't be, they should be making it clear that they don't use that otherwise, because if they're not making that clear, then their terms do seem to suggest that they can, and that's a gray area that's unacceptable. And so we kind of pushed the narrative on that pretty strongly, and I feel good that we did that. I think that was the right thing to do, and it was really exciting to see that NAVA then picked up, obviously um, their whole agreement, and so obviously when I was actually, I found out from Tim's basically didn't actually know that much about Voquent, and I ended up saying, Tim, this is great because we actually, we were doing this a year ago, and we really hit it off. And ever since then, yeah, I've become an advocate of NAVA. I think NAVA's great, and obviously happy to be subscribing to their terms, because to be fair, their terms are really the same terms that we were trying to write a year ago. But this year, and most recently, we decided to take things, a step forward. And this is important because I think that we realize that it's not good enough just to say to the voice actors, we're not going to use your voice for AI. We need to actually actively start telling customers who do ask, do you do AI voices? Can we commission an AI voice through you? We've seen some huge projects, which we haven't generally participated in, I might add. I mean, we've done some great stuff for good causes. We've worked on some wonderful projects for people, with disabilities and for children, in AI, and I don't feel bad about having done that. But I would say that what's really become more and more visible, what's really opened my eyes, is the sheer number of people asking about, whether they could get an AI built with one of our voice actors. And we've been open to that as long as the pay has been pretty substantial. We have been generally talking six figures upwards. So these aren't small sums of money. I would still argue even now, how much is enough? Right now, the way things are, I would say nothing. There is no amount of money that is going to be worth, cloning your entire identity to the extent that now looks possible. And so it has changed my opinion, but I think more importantly is that when we realized how the technology is progressing and we started to realize how it can be misused, it started to become really, really clear that we need to raise the alarm to the best extent that we can with our influence. We're not going to be the loudest voice in the world in terms of protecting safety for modern society. But honestly, voice cloning is extremely dangerous, and it's being used in some very, very bad ways. And seeing how effective the technology is, which is being sold to consumers for dollars, is frightening. And that's why we realized we don't want to be part of anything to do with these projects, at least until such time as very clear regulation is put in place. And that needs to happen at a government level. Self regulation is not regulation. It's like basically, asking a burglar to burgle responsibly.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about that because we're now where we sit when we're recording this interview. It probably will, well, within the next 6 months to a year, Apple will release iOS 17, which is fairly substantially rumored to have a function in there where you can
Yeah.
build an AI model of your own voice. Is this good for society or is it not so good for society?
That's only Apple could probably try to answer that question. Apple's got some. Apple's got, I want to say Apple didn't. One of the things I made a note of in the article, that we, well, not even the article, our statement, was that Apple were noticeably absent from the technology agreement that was made between, most of the big partners, the Amazons, the Microsofts, and the Metas and what have you, in relation to putting in place some form of regulation that addresses things like the safety of people who use these technologies, of AI in general. And Apple wasn't on there, but I think that's not because Apple doesn't agree with the premise of it. I think Apple has very clear ideas about how they think privacy should be protected and in what way. And I think that Apple's inclusion maybe comes at a cost to the other parties. Maybe they feel that they all have to be beholden to the way Apple wants to do things. But however you look at it, I think it's difficult because you want to trust a company like Apple that has as much influence as they do, and you want to trust that they're thinking out the bigger picture, and trust that they're thinking about the ramifications to society. And maybe when we see, how Apple's phones are made in China, and you look at the labor rights issues that are going on there, and some of the terrible things that you see on the news, and you think, are Apple a good company? But then, you could say that about maybe a lot of companies. They've got this kind of Western front. They look really amazing and wonderful and great values, and then you find out that everything's getting subcontracted to a third world country where human rights are a really big issue. But to get on point, I think as far as Apple's new technology is concerned, um, I don't know if that's so beneficial to society, what it's suggesting you can do. To me, the what is beneficial to Apple, because they'll find a way to repurpose that in some other way. And I think Apple's got some work to do to give people the assurances that those recordings and those AIs that are being built on your phone aren't capable of being misappropriated. Because if they are, that could be deadly. And that's a problem, isn't it?
It is a problem. And you have said before that, for instance, a well modeled AI voice served over a bad audio device now here in 2023, like a phone, makes children and the elderly especially vulnerable. And I want to talk about that because I think it has applications for the voiceover industry. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, there's been a number of different stories. I can't give you like an immediate link that I could talk to about offhand, but there's enough of them out there. You don't have to Google very long to start finding stories about where cloned voices and have become a case of abuse and misuse for. It doesn't necessarily have to be something as basic as fraud. Um, for something that's much more personal, like speaking to someone else's kids, for reasons that we only we are horrified to think about. Um, I think the thing is that if that technology is going to be widely and openly available without regulation, and it is right now, it is absolutely being used for all the wrong reasons. And it's almost like the governments are kind of waiting for enough of these tragedies to take place before they decide to react. Everybody knows there's an issue with this. They know that there's a problem, but everyone's waiting. And I think the thing is that um, this is a sort of a modern day societal safety issue. This is a human rights issue that that can my voice be cloned? Someone could watch this video afterwards and say, "I'm going to clone Miles's voice and make him say something else that he didn't say." Make him commit an act of fraud, make him endorse a product that he didn't endorse. This goes well beyond the misappropriation that where I'm missing out on compensation. I might not want to have anything to do with how this AI clone is being used at all for any reason, under any circumstance. There's no amount of money that I'd be willing to accept to have my AI clone being used for something else. And I think that just the very fact that that's even possible is a huge problem. And we can't just sit back and go, well, the government will fix it. They won't. And we can't go, oh, something. The AI is really creating a problem for performers, and it's a performers problem, because the rest of the world doesn't look at creative copyrights and compensation for creatives as their problem. And people think about their own problems in their own lives. And if somebody goes, well, I'm working at McDonald's or Burger King and I'm trying to make ends meet, and I don't know what this voice actor stuff is all about, but if they're not getting paid for their work, well, whoop-de-doo. It's not my problem. If they got a copyright problem, that sounds like a rich person's problem to me. You don't necessarily have to be rich. You just have to be disjointed and disconnected from that. But if somebody was actually, knocking on the door to pick up their kids and it isn't actually them, then it is their problem, isn't it? And I think that this is happening right now. This misappropriation is happening right now, and if it doesn't get dealt with, it's going to keep getting worse. And it's something that affects everyone. And I think there's a wider public interest at heart here. I think the government knows that there's a wider public interest in relation to all aspects of AI, but I think identity cloning, whether it's audio or visual or both, is particularly dangerous, and it needs to be dealt with more urgently than it is right now.
And that's where I think the urgency for all of us being vulnerable, especially children, especially the elderly, especially the disadvantaged, I hope, Miles, and you can tell me whether or not you agree, I hope that urgency will drive some of the evolution of the legislation and the regulation that's going to protect not just voice actors, but all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is that you know if you think about what the scope of the problem and how to resolve it, because obviously governments don't want to stand in the way of AI being developed, primarily because they don't have a lot of control over it. The AI is not run by the government; it's run by private corporations who are trying to monetize every aspect of what generative AI can do. And so I think where regulation needs to step in place is when it comes to licensing how audio is used. I think that that's what needs to be fixed. The same with video. I think particularly in the context of creating a clone. If the idea is, I see this on LinkedIn. People go, oh, it's something pretty soon. All my meetings are going to be held by my virtual clone, and I think it's great. And I think, wow, that's really wonderful. You're going to attend that meeting with all those virtual clones, and they're going to be attending with their virtual clones, and we'll just have a bunch of clones talking to each other. It sounds pretty useless to me, but this is the kind of future that a lot of people are buying into and are interested in. And I think that the government doesn't want to stand in the way of what they call sort of developmental progress of tech, but it's primarily because they're not actually in control of it. They're playing catch up with the tech companies, and the tech companies are looking to monetize every aspect from every angle, particularly the small ones that are trying to get in on the action. If they can just do a niche, if they can just be somebody who plagiarizes art, or if they can just be somebody who plagiarizes video, or somebody who just plagiarizes audio, whatever it is they're plagiarizing, if they can figure out how to plagiarize for creating generative works, well, if they can get on the map, they can build up the company, get it sold to somebody else, get the technology sold, and get out, and it's somebody else's problem. And so there's a lot of technical opportunists right now, which is making the whole field very, very, very noisy. But for voice actors, it obviously represents an issue, because it doesn't just affect their safety; it also affects their livelihoods. And so it's a double or even like a triple whammy, because they may be getting paid less than ever because AI is around. Their voice is getting used without their consent, or maybe they consented to an AI, and that AI is really successful, more successful than they are, and they're trying to figure out how they're supposed to capitalize on an AI that they haven't managed to make any success out of, and they just start to feel used and abused. And then of course there's the safety issue. So I think that all these things affect voice actors particularly badly, and I think actors as well. And I think that that problem is going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, and I think that's the crux of the issue between the current SAG-AFTRA strike here in the States. Both the SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild strikes are essentially around the same issue, and that is we're fighting not to be eliminated by AI.
Yeah.
Whether it's a mocap, an on-camera actor, whether it's a writer, whether it's a voice actor, and this is going to affect pretty much every creative. As you started at the top of our chat to say, this doesn't just affect our industry. This is the AI impact is going to be felt through every particular realm and genre of art as we move forward. So the battles that we're all fighting, whether it's writers, actors, producers, sculptor, you name it, right? Whoever it is, we're all fighting for each other when you really get down to it. I want to ask you one last question, Miles, and that is we've talked at several points, and even in this chat, about the gap between the technology and the regulation, the legislation. Do we ever close that gap? Do you see a world where we're ever able to either remove the gap or to at least minimize it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what regulation could do would be could start to lock down the sale in the jurisdictions that they operate in. So the sale of cloning technology could be locked down. It could be federated. It could be moderated. And I don't mean self-moderated. It could be government regulated to the extent like in the United Kingdom, you have the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, and they play a big part in making sure that people aren't able to organize, works and methods using currency just because they decide they want to. They're subject to regulations. They have to demonstrate that they are going to be responsible with how they're dealing with other people's money. And I think that if essentially the models that train clones is within itself becomes something of value, it has within itself a similar quality to a currency, and therefore should be subject to the same level of scrutiny, oversight, and responsibility. And the way to start that would just be to start making it a little bit more difficult to sell these things without there being a lot more questions answered right out the gate. Like, what specifically is this going to be used for? And has the person who's being cloned specifically given their consent for that specific thing that it's going to be used for? And will they always have the ability to pull the plug if they want to? Because I think that there's people who are being who've been asked to do recordings for contracts. I know people who right now who I'm speaking to whose voices are getting used for AIs, and those AIs were built on audio that they gave 20 years ago. And so the problem is that they signed a contract not really thinking that they were going to necessarily have a problem 20 years on. But it is a problem if they feel that they're ultimately going to end up competing with a younger version of themselves as an AI. But there's one thing that I think that should be said, Paul, and that is we shouldn't give AI as much credit as AI is currently trying to get and take right now. AI still has got a long way to go to be as good as a human voice. And if there's anything that we should feel good about, it's the fact that it's still really easy to detect and people still really hate AI voices. There's nobody who wants to watch a really great film or listen to a great audiobook or consume a great series on TV, whether it's animated or acted. There's nobody who wants to play a video game that's got a crummy AI voice that they can detect within seconds. It just makes them feel a little bit sick. They just think, oh, this isn't really good quality material. This is cheap crap. It's anybody could have made this. Anybody could have written this. It could have even been written by an AI. And people automatically their sensors go off and say, this is garbage. Anything that AI currently is associated with, at least from an audio video perspective, is garbage. And I think will that change? Will that get harder to detect over time? I think it will. I think that's where the real challenges are. But for now, for the time being, and I think for the near term foreseeable future, no change. It's still garbage. But will it always be that way? I don't know. It's really hard to say. I used to think a few years ago I would have thought that that's 10 years away. Maybe it's more like 5 years away. But I think we've still got a good 5 year run where humans can absolutely demolish an AI voice comfortably. No one's going to pick an AI voice for anything that has any meaning or budget. And so people aren't losing work, I think, to people who have money who want to protect their creations that they've made with a great quality product, whether it's a great quality training video, a great quality corporate, explainer, a great quality, advertisement or promotion, a great quality radio ad, a great quality IVR voice, even. There's no comparison. Anybody who wants quality is not going to go to an AI provider, um, but it's still there, and it's still an issue, and it is getting better. There's no doubt.
So, some cause for hope, and yet still some uncertainty.
Yeah.
Uh, Miles Chicoine, the CEO of Voquent. Miles, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us and furthering the conversation around this issue that's going to continue to evolve at light speed. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you.